Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your new host, Nelson, here on this Monday afternoon. Yes, I am the new host. That's amazing. For all of you guys who may have seen me on the other basketball podcast, I've been moved up, so now I get to talk about football for the first time in forever. I'm so excited to be doing this. Now, since this is going to be like my first week of doing this, I'm going to be trying out, trying to find a decent and solid formula that I could go with and, do these, not just the NFL season, but as well as the NBA season, because, they're both happening simultaneously. I'm sure you guys know that. And I'm going to see what formula works, what formula doesn't work, what to talk about, this, that, and the other. So I'm still sort of feeling out this new situation. But anyways, for the first segment of the sports podcast, we're going to talk about the Sunday night football game. The Lions, they made a huge comeback against the Houston Texans, and we're just going to go ahead and talk about that because I did see that game, and I did see a lot of the other games as well, but I just wanted to talk about this one because I felt like it was the more interesting one, aside from maybe the Steelers beating the Commanders. That was another interesting game, as well as the Chiefs beating the Broncos. I'll talk all about that in the rest of the week, but right now I wanted to talk about the Lions game. And then in the second segment, I've been wanting to do this for a very long time, but I'm going to talk about the Giants and the fact that they played in Germany and the results of the game and what I thought about the game and everything else because, it's the first time I actually get to talk about my favorite team, the New York Giants, or my least favorite team at times, so, take with that what you will. Then in the third segment, we're going to shift back over to the NBA because Chet Holmgren suffered a very, very, very bad injury. That was completely unexpected. I did not expect the injury to be this bad, so we're going to talk a little bit about that in the third segment. And then in the fourth segment, I'm going to be doing a recap of all of the NBA games, as well as a prediction on the Monday Night Football game that's going to be happening tonight. And then we also have a special fifth segment at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that if you guys are interested. Before I begin, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, something that you've just been dying to share. We're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box and you can send in your comments and the donations that way. If Super Chat's not really your thing, that's fine. You could always use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment as well, GSMCPodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. They really help the show. They make it much more interactive between myself and you guys. So let's go right ahead. My very first segment ever talking about football, and we are going to be talking about the Lions game against Houston. So this game was very, very ugly. In fact, you could say that these quarterbacks were having a mid-off in this game. It was really, there were a lot of interceptions, primarily from Jared Goff, or as I like to call him, Jared Goof when he plays like this. Yeah, we had a Jared Goof sighting this night. I mean, he threw 5 interceptions in this singular game. He almost was about to lead the league in interceptions just off of this one game that he played. It was that bad. And, I mean, throughout the entirety of the first half, it was all the Houston Texans, primarily because Jared Goof was playing football and not Jared Goff. It was really, really bad. I mean, most of the running backs for the Lions, especially in the first half, they tended to, they did not really play all that well. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, he only had 71 yards and averaged 3.7 on each attempt. However, they started to pick it up a little bit later in the second half when Houston started to become a little bit generous with their interceptions as well. CJ Stroud did not have a very good game efficiently, in terms of efficiency wise for QBR either. He had only a 64 QBR, not all that good. And he also threw 2 interceptions along with that as well. There was a lot of interceptions in this game. And in the beginning of the game, the Texans, they were playing solid, but again, it wasn't like they were necessarily capitalizing on a lot of these interceptions, right? So they capitalized on the first one, however, scored a touchdown on their first drive off of a Jared Goof interception. I'm going to say Jared Goof until he starts playing like Jared Goff, just so that way you guys know. But then the game was still rather close in the second quarter because The Lions, they ended up getting down 7-10, but again, it's a field goal away from tying the game. Then the Houston Texans, they ended up making a field goal, but then Jared Goff came back and threw an interception right back. But instead of capitalizing on it with a touchdown, which would have most likely ended the game or maybe propelled them a little bit forward, they settled for a field goal. Then both of the teams exchanged punts, and then afterwards Houston ended up with a touchdown, and then Jared Goff came back just before the first half ended and threw another interception. Then in the third quarter, it was just an interception battle between the two. First, Houston threw an interception, then Jared Goff came back and threw another interception, but instead of capitalizing on it, Houston ended up punting, and then Detroit ended up scoring the touchdown right after. Then C.J. Stroud was generous enough to give them the ball right back off of an interception, but then Jared Goff came back and threw another interception. And then they exchanged punts, and then eventually down the line, there was a missed field goal coming in from Houston, which then allowed the Detroit Lions towards the end of the game to seal the win off of a 52-yard field goal, I believe it was, and thus end the game. So this game was really, really ugly. Like, it was very ugly. Not as ugly as the Giants and the Panthers game, in my opinion, but still a pretty ugly game. But the Lions, with this game, despite the fact that it was ugly, they've shown that they can compete. They've definitely shown that they can compete. It doesn't matter how bad necessarily their quarterback is, because I think the Texans are a pretty solid team. And the fact that they were able to beat them while with Goff throwing 5 interceptions, it really says a lot. Jared Goff, or Jared Goff, whichever you want to call him, he is now the first quarterback since Matt Ryan, I believe, to win a game and while throwing 5 interceptions. I think Matt Ryan did that in maybe like 2012, I want to say, somewhere around that time. And again, when you win a game like this, obviously, you can clean this up. The game could have been way cleaner on both sides. I mean, you read the play, you saw the play-by-play, you heard the play-by-play and what I had to say about that. It was not very good, and it was very, very inefficient. The teams were very turnover prone, but this is stuff that they can easily work towards. And normally, the Lions, they've been really good at protecting the ball. And they're a team that gets a lot of yak, and that's a thing that I love to say. They get a lot of yak, yards after catch. And they're a very solid team. In fact, since, this is the first time I'm doing this, I'm going to say right here and now, I think the Super Bowl is going to be Ravens and Lions. That's going to be the two teams that are going to make the Super Bowl. And if anything were to mess up, then I can see the Chiefs completely messing up the Ravens' chances just based off of how they've been playing, as well as in the NFC side, I can see the Eagles potentially winning and beating the Lions as well. Those are the two other scenarios where I don't see the Lions or the Ravens making the Super Bowl. One of those two can happen because, again, the way that the Eagles have been playing so far in the beginning they were very, very rusty. Jalen Hurts was not really playing all that well, but recently they've been cleaning it up, and this is sort of what we expect from good teams. They get turnover prone. It's fine. Then they clean it up as the weeks go on because it's a very, very long NFL season and there's a lot of prep time that goes into these games. And I don't think that we're going to see a Jared Goff game like this ever again. I mean, 5 interceptions is really bad. But for the most part, the Lions, they've been playing very solid. Like, again, this is a win against a pretty competent team in the Texans. They recently did beat the Packers last week as well, not to mention beating the Vikings along with that as well. Again, these are all pretty competent teams. Now, I believe the only game that they lost was against the Buccaneers at home, and the Bucs were a completely healthy roster at that point. But ever since then, they've really seemed to clean it up, especially against the Seahawks, where they were just like a machine out there. They were getting yak after yak after yak. Now, for the Texans and the Texans side, I mean, they really benefit from the fact that they're in my opinion, one of the weaker divisions in the AFC. Like, the AFC South, it's not necessarily a strong division. It's not like the division is up for grabs like the AFC North or something like that. And I mean, the Colts, I don't see them making the playoffs. I also don't see the Titans making the playoffs at all. And at this rate, the Jaguars, I did not expect the Jaguars to be this bad. I mean, I expected them to put up a little bit of a fight for the AFC South, but that has not been the case whatsoever. So the Texans, they're most likely going to make the playoffs anyway. So it's not like this team was like a mediocre or a bad team going into this game. However, I will say that the Texans, they did have injuries, and I mean, Stephon Diggs was out, just to name one of them. There have been several other key players on the team that have also been ruled out for this game. So you could make the argument that if they had a healthy roster, then this game would have gone a little bit different. But then again, they were a missed field goal away from winning the game. Not to mention the fact that they were completely scoreless in the second half, which is not ideal, especially when you're going up against a playoff team like the Lions. And there's been some issues with the Lions and their secondary, and their defense is mediocre. You can make that argument. I think it's mediocre, but the second half, it's sort of proven that they can lock up. They can definitely lock in and do what it needs to take to win this game. So again, this was just a very, very, very turnover prone game, and it was a very ugly game. But at the end of the day, the better team ended up making it out on top. And that's all she wrote. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the second segment where I talk about the New York Giants, the New Jersey Giants. I mean, they're called New York, but they play in New Jersey. So this is going to be the first time I ever get to talk about the Giants, and I am not going to enjoy it because we are bad. So I'll be right back after this short segment. I'll be right back after this short break. Excuse me. Be sure to stay tuned for that segment if you guys are interested. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be focusing on the Germany game between the Panthers and the Giants. This is a segment I'm not going to enjoy, mainly because I am a Giants fan and we're going to have to talk about how bad my team is. But aside from that, before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, something that you've just been dying to share, we're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $sign below the chat box and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Super Chat's not really your thing. That's totally fine. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker on each and every show segment, GSMCpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way as well. They really help the show. They make it much more interactive between myself and you guys. So let's go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off, and let's talk about this Germany game. So this game started at 9:30. Yes, I woke up at 9:30 in the morning to watch this abysmal game. And simply put, wir steigen, which is German for we stink. The Giants are bad. They're a terrible team, And I've never talked about them before, so I'm sure like if you've been watching the sports podcast, then you already know just how bad this team is. And if you've been paying attention to the NFL season, then you already know how bad this team is. Daniel Jones threw 2 interceptions in this game. What else is new? There were a lot of fumbles. There were a lot of turnovers on both sides as well. It was not pretty. And this game was so bad that it eventually ended up going into overtime, meaning I had to force myself to watch a completely different quarter that I just did not want to watch. And, of course, the Giants, they had the ball in the overtime period, first possession, and, of course, they fumble the ball to lose the game. And I'm not really mad about the fumble, honestly. Because the big reason why I'm not mad about this loss is because now the Giants, they have the number 1 pick in the draft. As of right now. So we'll see how the rest of the season plays out, but as of right now, I do not want the Giants to win anymore. I want that first overall pick in the draft. And let's talk about the game itself. So again, the game was really, really slow. It wasn't a high scoring game, as you guys can tell by the score. It was 17-20, and the Giants ended up losing. The Panthers, they ended up starting out with a field goal. Actually, no, they did not. Excuse me, that was wrong. Both of the teams exchanged punts. Then the Panthers, they ended up scoring a touchdown, while meanwhile the Giants, they were forced to punt again. And then they scored a field goal to go up 10-0. And then the Giants decided to be a real class act and just miss the field goal completely. So, yeah. And then they both exchanged punts again. It was really a punt off. And then Daniel Jones threw an interception near the red zone. Of course he did, because he's Daniel Jones. That's what he does. And then, luckily, the Panthers, they didn't really score off of it. But, of course, we end the first half completely scoreless. Really, the fake comeback, I should say, like a catfish comeback almost, it started towards the end of the game. And it was just awful. I mean, the Panthers, they started off with a touchdown, and to make the score 17-0. But then, actually no, excuse me, the Giants, they scored a touchdown to make it 7-10, and then the Panthers answered right back with a touchdown of their own to make it 17-7. But then out of nowhere, the Giants, they found life with a 13-play, 96-yard drive from Daniel Jones, which was honestly a little bit impressive, I will say that. But regardless, that does not change my opinion on Daniel Jones. I actually haven't really given my opinion on him, because for some reason, there's a lot of Giants fans that they still have faith in him, and they still think he's a solid quarterback and he just needs more pieces around him. I'm not one of those guys. In my opinion, Daniel Jones is bad and isn't an NFL caliber quarterback. At no point in this man's entire career, aside from 2022, has he looked like the starting quarterback that the Giants have been looking for. And I think this season just enforces the notion that not only he's fragile, but he cannot win a game. The Giants are one of the only 2 teams that have not been able to win a game at home this season. And the other team, of course, is Dallas, because Dallas, right? But aside from that, I mean, the Giants, they're just bad. And a big reason why they're bad is because they have a quarterback that has the inability to win games. One of the things that made me like Daniel Jones in 2022 was the fact that it didn't matter how bad they played throughout the first 3 quarters. It seemed like he was always able to find a way to make this team win in the fourth and make the other team angry. And that was one of the things that I thought would have solidified him as being the franchise quarterback, but of course I was wrong. This season just enforces the notion that Daniel Jones is a quarterback that can't do much. He can't throw the ball more than 20 yards down the field. He has terrible decision making, and he still fumbles the ball like it ain't no thing. Not to mention the fact that he loves to throw these interceptions out of nowhere, because, that's just Daniel Jones. But back on this game, and speaking of interceptions, in the fourth quarter, the Giants had a golden chance to win the game and to take the lead off of a fumble coming in from the defense, because, that's just our defense. Our defense is always incredibly solid. Again, solid. There are chances where we just, put up stinker performances on the defense, but there's also chances where we end up getting turnovers. But of course, since we have Daniel Jones at quarterback, those turnovers end up being nothing as Daniel Jones throws an interception and completely negates the turnover that they ended up getting. Now, I will say that Tracy Jr., I believe it was, did end up not catching the ball. Like, the ball hit him right in his hands, and then he bobbled around, and then the Panthers defender was able to make a play and make the interception possible. But still, that's an interception that looks like a Daniel Jones interception. Nothing we can really do about it. That's just something that he does. And luckily, they didn't score off of that drive, and they ended up having to punt. So that gave us another opportunity to try and win the game. But of course, it ends in a 3-and-out, and we have to punt. Then we get another opportunity to win the game, but this time we don't have any timeouts. But we end up getting a field goal, which sends the game into overtime. But it doesn't matter. We fumble the ball again on the very first play of the drive and ultimately lose the game. So that's how the cookie crumbles. And on an individual standpoint, I mean, their running back, Chuba Hubbard, was absolutely destroying us in this entire game. He ended the game with 153 yards on the ground, along with 1 touchdown on 28 attempts. I mean, he was just unreal in this game, straight up just walking all over our defense. It was not good. However, I will say that Tyrone Tracy Jr., aside from those fumbles that he ended up causing, which seems to be a really big problem with these running backs. I mean, Singletary had that problem as well early on in the season, just fumbling the ball for no reason. I mean, Daniel Jones, he also ran in for a touchdown as well. But again, those turnovers, they don't mean anything. I'm sorry. Like, when you turn the ball over as much as he does, it doesn't matter how many touchdowns you end up scoring. He's just so turnover prone. It's not even funny. Like, he has 8 touchdowns in the season and 7 interceptions. That is not good, and there's still people that defend him to this day. I don't understand how that's even possible, and I don't understand. I think this is going to be the only quarterback in the history of football to not win a home game, to lead his team to 2-8, and people still give him the benefit of the doubt, because I've never seen any other quarterback be able to do that. Not to mention the fact that they lost to Bryce Young, who is looking to be like one of the biggest NFL busts in recent history. Looking to be, again, not entirely sure. His career is still young, so we do have to see how the rest of it goes. But again, this game was all Chuba Hubbard because Bryce Young didn't necessarily play all that good in this matchup either. I mean, he had a 15 for 25 completion rate, and he threw 126 yards, but he did throw a touchdown. Despite this, he still finished with a higher QBR than Daniel Jones, which shows just how awful he is. But that's besides the point. And, I mean, again, this game was, I don't want to say it was as turnover prone as the Lions game, because, like, I mean, it wasn't just like, both sides having turnovers. It was really just one side that was really dominant in the turnover category, which was the Giants. Of course they were, because why wouldn't they be? And I mean, this game was just really, really ugly. The fact that it had to end off of a turnover from the Giants and turned into a field goal for the Panthers was ugly. But again, I'm not necessarily mad at that, because now the Giants, they have the number 1 pick in the draft at this rate. So assuming that we stand course and we stay in trajectory of this losing season, there's 2 options that I see possibly happening for the Giants. So, 1, I hope and I think that they're going to try and draft Travis Hunter. Now, Travis Hunter, he plays for Colorado. He is arguably a top 5 wide receiver and a top 5 cornerback in the entirety of college football, which really, really says a lot. There has never been a player that elite on both ends of the floor, and I think that he is definitely going to be a high pick in this draft. The only reason why I don't see him going to the Giants off of this, if the Giants do get the number 1 pick, is because of Deion Sanders. Now, Deion Sanders, he's said multiple times that he's not going to allow Travis Hunter to get drafted to a team that is not going to play him on both positions. And obviously, Deion's just looking out for his players. He wants his players to succeed, and he sees just how competent Travis Hunter is on not just the offense, but also on the defensive side of the ball, and he's not going to let some team limit his greatness, which I totally understand. However, I do think that might be a problem, because not only does Deion not like the Giants, because, he played for the Cowboys and he also played for San Fran, but chances are that the injuries coming in from Travis Hunter are going to be even greater if he plays for the Giants, because we know that the Giants, they don't really have the best turf in the world, and that turf tends to get a lot of players injured really, really fast. I mean, there was this one game where I watched actually there's been several games like this, but it's like, it seemed like every single player on both teams ended up going down with injuries. I don't remember exactly what game that was, because again, there's a lot of games just like that the Giants have played, but that field is not really the best. So there's a chance that he might not get drafted by the Giants if Dion has anything to say about it, but that's okay. We can go to the original plan, which was to draft a quarterback, which is to draft, in my opinion, I think it should be Cam Ward. He's a quarterback for University of Miami, and I mean, he's just been phenomenal. They did lose to Georgia Tech recently in college football, and he did fumble the ball to sort of seal the loss, but still, I think he's a very, very solid quarterback. And I mean, there's also Shedeur Sanders, but again, I don't think the Deion Sanders is really going to allow Shedeur Sanders to play for the Giants. But again, only time will tell, and we will see when the draft comes. But those are the two options, and if they do end up selecting Travis Hunter for that draft, then they can always wait one more year. Unfortunately, that would mean that we'd have to put up with Daniel Jones for another year, which I really, really, really don't want, which is why I'm hoping that they draft Cam Ward. But they might want to try and get Archie Manning in a Giants uniform, because that's just the Manning legacy, I guess you could say. So those are the two options that I see, and that's a little bit of a recap of the NFL of the football game that ended up happening in Germany between the Giants and the Panthers. Now, obviously, this is not going to be entirely about the NFL. Now, I'm going to do the rest of the recaps for going on in the week, considering as since there aren't going to be many football games throughout the week. In fact, there's only going to be one that's happening tonight, and then there's going to be another one on Thursday. Maybe I'll dabble into college football. We'll figure that out. But for now, I'm going to shift my focus back to the NBA, because we have to talk about a huge injury coming in from Chet Holmgren, which seems like it could affect the OKC's season, at least for the remaining weeks that he's out. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be shifting our focus to NBA basketball, primarily because Chet Holmgren has just suffered a serious injury, and this could really be detrimental to OKC and the rest of their season. So, if you guys haven't been keeping up with the NBA, right now, the Oklahoma City Thunder are 8-2. They've only lost 2 games, and they recently lost their game against the Golden State Warriors at home. They lost 127 to 116. A big reason why this game was not close. In fact, it was a blowout for a majority of the game until the Oklahoma City Thunder mounted a fake comeback. And really the big reason why the game was so close was because Chet only played in 5 minutes. And the reason why was because he went out with a really bad injury. He has apparently suffered a pelvic fracture. And this injury is going to sideline him for at least 8 to 10 weeks, which is a very, very long time. And this is very bad for the Thunder in terms of their standings. I mean, the Western Conference in the NBA is already competitive as it is. In fact, the top 10 teams in the Western Conference, they're all positive. And the worst team in the Western Conference, debatably, is 6-4. Like, that is incredibly dangerous, and they're going to be treading on some very difficult waters because over in the Eastern Conference, the Magic are 5-6. However, they are the 4th seed in the entirety of the Eastern Conference. So think about that. The 4th seed in the Eastern Conference is 5-6, a negative record. Meanwhile, you have to be 6-4 with a positive record in order to even have a chance in the Western Conference as of right now. In fact, let's see what team has the closest record to 5-6. Right. So the Dallas Mavericks right now, they're 5-5. So a neutral record, and that record is better than the Orlando Magic's 5-6. However, they're all the way down to 11 in the standings, which again, that just shows just how competitive the Western Conference really is in the NBA right now. Not saying that the Eastern Conference isn't competitive, but it is very, very top heavy, especially when you have teams like the Cavs and the Boston Celtics. The Cavs, they've yet to lose a game at all in this season, which is very, very, very impressive, if I do say so myself. And I mean, the Celtics, they're 9-2, but the team directly below them, the Pacers, is 5-5. Like, that is a huge gap. In fact, like, what's a third team in the Eastern Conference? Like, what's a third-seeded team in the Eastern Conference is, in reality, an 11th-seeded team in the Western Conference. Like, that's very, very competitive. And with this in mind, that would mean that, assuming that the Western Conference continues going at this pace, the OKC are going to have to try and continue winning games without Chet Holmgren. And that's going to be very difficult considering how Chet Holmgren right now, he's averaging 18 points per game, 9 rebounds, along with 2.9 blocks per game, almost 3 blocks per game. Now, to keep in mind, that's not more than Victor Wembanyama's averages. I think Victor is averaging around like maybe 6 blocks per game or something like that, which is the last time I checked. So that is absolutely ridiculous. In fact, I'm actually going to go ahead and check Victor Wembanyama's stats right now just to make sure that I'm not inaccurate. But again, that was the last time that when I looked at the stats, those were the averages that I saw coming in from him. In fact, yeah, right now it dropped all the way down to 4, but regardless, he's still leading the league in blocks. But again, this is just a very, very difficult conference to even compete in. And so to see him go down with a pelvic fracture, that is, and it's a huge injury that's going to sideline him for 8 to 10 weeks. It's a very, very painful sight for OKC fans. And Holmgren didn't even put weight on his right leg as he limped off the court. So it's like that injury just came out of nowhere. I did not expect it to be that bad. And it's his recovery, like he has to hope that he can recover really, really quickly for the Thunder. They really need him. And this marks Chet Holmgren's second major injury in just 2 seasons after missing his entire rookie year with a Lisfranc fracture, with a Lisfranc injury. I have no idea what that body part is. I'm not a doctor. And the Thunder, they were excited to see him, suit up as, their number 2 pick in 2022. Now it's just another setback, though the team remains rather hopeful. Like, I will say that the Thunder, they have a very, very competent team. And their young stars are really good. SGA right now, based off of the last MVP rankings that I saw, he was top 4 in MVP rankings. And he's probably still in the top 4, but again, they're going to need a lot of production coming in from SGA if they're going to hope to continue this success down the line. And the diagnosis of a right iliac wing fracture doesn't necessarily rule out a return for this season, and that's a little bit of hope for Thunder fans to really hang on to. The Thunder, however, they won't sit back and they won't sulk it. They're going to have to win. And Jalen Williams noted that they've adapted before. Quote, "It's not the first time that we've done it, so looking forward to the challenge on that." So without Holmgren, they'll have to make do with the small lineups and the small ball lineups that they run, and their depth is going to be tested further, especially with the new center that they recently acquired in Isaiah Hartenstein. And Isaiah Hartenstein, he's still sidelined for most of the season, but again, they're going to have to expect a lot of production coming in from him. But if there's one thing that this team has shown, it is the fact that they are resilient. And they're 8-2, despite the tough loss to the Warriors. They still have the talent to stay competitive until Chet Holmgren makes his return. So again, we're going to have to start seeing some more of SGA's signature 31-point games. In fact, last season, it was a very rare sight when SGA dropped anywhere near less than 31 points or anywhere more than 31 points. He was always a very, very consistent 31-point per game scorer. And that's just something that the OKC hope to replicate as Chet Holmgren recovers from this injury. So a little bit of a shorter segment, but that's mainly because I have to go into the next segment, which is probably going to be a bit longer than the rest of the other segments, because not only am I going to be recapping the games in the NBA that happened over the weekend, but I'm also going to be talking about the NFL game that's scheduled to happen later tonight, Monday Night Football, between the Dolphins and the Rams. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about that right after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by not the basketball. Excuse me, I'm still used to the basketball podcast. So let me try that again. Welcome back to the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we're going to be doing a recap of all of the NBA games that went down over the weekend, and as well as giving some of my predictions for the NFL game that's going to happen later tonight, and maybe a little bit, if we do have time, maybe a bit of predictions of the NBA games that are going to be going down tonight as well. And obviously I'm going to be paying more attention to the Monday Night Football game. I always do, but I'm going to try my best with the allotted time that we have. So let's go right ahead. So on Friday, the games that went down. There were a lot of games that went down in the NBA on Friday. And I predicted that the Celtics were going to end up winning in this matchup against the Nets, and they ultimately proved that to be true in an overtime win against the Brooklyn Nets. Cam Thomas, he ended the game with 31. Cameron Johnson, he ended the game with 18, and Dennis Schroeder ended with 20. Meanwhile, on the Celtics side, Jason Tatum continues to have his MVP caliber performance with 33 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, and 1 block. Excuse me. There was no Jaylen Brown in this matchup, but that's no problem, because this team is still good enough to combat against the Brooklyn Nets, as they've always been throughout most of the season and like most of the years as of recent memory. Now, the Bucks, they lose again to the New York Knicks, and this is just going to be a trend for the Bucks, I think, for the entirety of the season. I fully expect Giannis to get traded and try to force his way out of the situation. The duo of Doc Rivers and Darvin Ham is just absolutely horrible. I don't think Doc Rivers is going to have a job in the NBA anymore after this. I don't think Darvin Ham is going to have a job in the NBA anymore after this season either. They're just two terrible, terrible coaches, and they get away with a lot. I mean, the Bucks, they lost despite the fact that Giannis ended with 24 and 12. Damian Lillard did not really play to his standards. He did have 19 points, but shot 6 for 15 from the field. The team really, really seems to lack depth. Bobby Portis did not play well in this matchup either, 1 for 8, 4 points. And on the Knicks side, Karl-Anthony Towns ended the game with 32 points along with 11 rebounds, the leading scorer for the Knicks. So, just an incredible game coming in from Cat. Now, I'm going to go ahead and speed through most of these, mainly because, again, I'm not sure how much time I'm going to have. The Cavs, they ended up beating the Golden State Warriors as I expected them to. They continue to have a flawless record. They won 136-117, despite a really solid shooting performance coming in from the Golden State Warriors. Their bench, the starters, they didn't really seem to play all that well. Steph Curry ended with only 12 points. And he was 5 for 10 from the field, however, which is pretty solid. But again, the rotation on this team and the depth on this team, at least at the guard position, is really, really good. And again, Darius Garland, he played phenomenally against the Warriors with 27 points. Now, I thought that the Mavericks were going to end up getting the best of the Suns. That did not happen. They ended up losing 113 to 114 against Phoenix. I mean, Phoenix, they played really, really well as a team. And, the Mavericks, they also played pretty well as a team with Luka Doncic dropping 37 and 7 and Kyrie Irving dropping 29. Klay Thompson, he only had 12 points, 4 for 13, 1 for 7 from 3. It really, really seems like, that dropping Klay Thompson and letting Klay Thompson walk, if you were the Golden State Warriors, was the best move. Kevin Durant, he ended with 26 points. Devin Booker ended with 13 points along with 12 assists. And Bradley Beal ended with 15 points. So again, the rest of the team, they played very solid. Lakers, they ended up beating the 76ers. Of course they did. The 76ers, they still don't have Joel Embiid up until, today. Now they're going to have Joel Embiid. Paul George did not play well against LeBron at all. 4 for 13, 0 for 6 from 3. Meanwhile, LeBron, of course, he ended the game with a triple-double, 21 points, 12 rebounds, 13 assists. Anthony Davis continues his MVP season, 31 points, along with 9 rebounds to go along with that. Excuse me. The Lakers, they're just really good now. And LeBron is still LeBron. The Hornets, they ended up beating the Pacers in this matchup, 103 to 83. A very solid performance for the Hornets, one that I really did not expect. But then again, this is what happens when you go up against a team that is not really good on the defensive side. LaMelo Ball ended with 31 points, a really inefficient 31 points, by the way, 10 for 29 from the field and 5 for 18 from 3. But regardless, 31 points is still 31 points. Hawks, they lost to the Pistons in a very surprising loss. I didn't expect the Hawks to lose in this matchup. They lost 122 to 121. Magic, they beat the Pelicans, another outcome that I did not really expect. The Magic won 115 to 88. I don't think that the Pelicans had Zion in this matchup. In fact, I don't think that the Pelicans are going to have Zion much for the rest of the season, considering how he is out indefinitely, from what I know. So, not really good look for the Pelicans right now. The Thunder, they ended up winning 126 to 107 against Houston. Grizzlies ended up winning 128-104 against Washington. The Nuggets ended up winning 135 to 122, I believe, against the Miami Heat. Of course, Jokic ends with a 30-point triple-double. What else is new? 30 points, 11 rebounds, along with 14 assists. He's probably the leading candidate in the MVP conversation right now, just based off of his last few performances. Either just behind Anthony Davis or just in front of Anthony Davis. Timberwolves ended up beating the Blazers 127 to 102, and the Kings ended up losing to the Clippers 107 to 98. Addition by subtraction. And on Saturday, the Cavs, they ended up beating the Nets 105 to 100, and now their record is 11-0, the only flawless team in the entire NBA right now. The Jazz, they ended up beating the Spurs in a surprising 111 to 110 win, and they improved their record to 2-7, which I believe is the same as the Bucks right now. Victor had 24 points, 16 rebounds, and 7 blocks in this game, and they still lost, which really says a lot about the Spurs. The Bulls, they ended up beating the Hawks 125 to 113, and the Clippers, they continue winning, beating the Raptors 105 to 103. I'm very, very surprised with the Clippers and their success. Addition by subtraction really is working. Now, yesterday, the Pacers, they ended up beating the Knicks, an outcome that I didn't really expect. They won 132 to 121, mainly because Mikal Bridges forgot how to shoot in this game. The Warriors, as I mentioned before, they ended up beating the Thunder 127 to 116 in this matchup, mainly because Chet Holmgren was injured. The Nuggets, they ended up beating the Mavericks, and of course, Jokic again drops another triple-double. He's the first player in NBA history to record a stat line of 37 points, 15 assists, and 18 rebounds. Just phenomenal coming in from Jokic. The Lakers also continue to win with another LeBron James triple-double. I mean, what can't he do? He's LeBron. 19 points, 16 assists, and 10 rebounds along with that. It should also be noted, D'Angelo Russell has been benched. About time. He has finally been benched, which means that LeBron is the only point guard in the starting lineup right now. Yes, LeBron is the point guard. Like it. It's the only thing that really makes sense. I mean, Cam Reddish isn't running the point. Austin Reeves, he brings the ball up sometimes, but LeBron's the point guard. End of story. Point guard in the chat. And Anthony Davis, he ended with 22 points and 4 rebounds along with that as well. And D'Lo, I mean, he seems to be playing around the same as he did on the bench. I'm not entirely sure if that's really a good move, but we'll see how it goes in the future. Right now, they're 2-0 with D'Lo coming off the bench, so we'll see. Again, it was against pretty bad teams, but we'll see how it goes in the future. Houston, they ended up beating the Pistons, taking care of business, despite the fact that the Pistons were favorites in this game for some reason, I think. And they ended up winning 101-99. The Bucks continue their losing streak, losing to the Celtics 113-107. Giannis, of course, puts up 43 points, 13 rebounds, and he still lost. This Bucks team is horrible. I cannot believe that they fired Adrian Griffin just to hire Doc Rivers and Darvin Ham to be their 2 coaches, and it's really, really bad. I mean, Adrian Griffin single-handedly has a better record as the head coach for the Milwaukee Bucks, more so than Doc Rivers does and more so than Darvin Ham does. And I really don't understand. I mean, this was a coach that was winning and he still ended up getting fired. I don't know what the front office was thinking, and I don't know what the organization was thinking completely getting rid of him. The Magic, they actually surprisingly continue to win, beating the Wizards. But again, this is the Wizards, so not really much of a surprise there. 121-94 was the final score in this matchup. The 76ers beat the Hornets in a very, very close game. I mean, the game was forced into overtime thanks to a ridiculous LaMelo Ball three-point shot coming from the corner. It was a fadeaway three, which was insane. LaMelo also ended with 38 points. Of course he did. But again, 30 shots. That is super, super inefficient. But again, 38 points is 38 points. And, excuse me, 76ers, they ended up winning this game, of course. The game ended up going into overtime, mainly because Paul George could not hit the game-winning shot. And, I mean, I don't know what he was doing in that final minute, but he held the ball for like 4 seconds, did a jab step, and then took a step back, and then bricked the three. And because of that, he did not play a single minute in overtime, which was kind of funny, but I digress. Next, the Heat ended up shocking the Timberwolves, beating them 95-94 in this matchup. The Kings ended up shocking the Suns, beating them 127-118 in this matchup in overtime, thanks to the clutch performance from DeMar DeRozan as well as De'Aaron Fox late in the overtime period. And the Grizzlies ended up completely destroying the Blazers 134-89. Now, this was a very, 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 very bad game for the Portland Trailblazers. How bad was it? Well, think of it like this. So, the Blazers, they got absolutely blown out of the water. That much is for certain. But the Grizzlies did not have John Morant. The Blazers as a team shot 42 threes, only made 4 of them. They also shot 34% from the field. They also only had one starter which had more than double-digit points. And finally, they turned the ball over 23 times. That is bad. That is bad ball. And they have an argument for being one of the worst teams in the entire NBA. And honestly, we're going to have to see if they are after I'm looking at the 5th segment. Stay tuned for that. And finally, since, I just recapped all of the NBA games that went down, let's go ahead and talk about the football games that are going to be happening. The football game, that's going to be happening tonight, which is the Rams against the Miami Dolphins. Now, from what I've seen, I believe Tua Tagovailoa is going to be a game-time decision for the Miami Dolphins, which could end up being a problem for the Rams because obviously, Tua is a far better quarterback than whichever other quarterback that they have. It's honestly, that's how bad it is. I haven't been paying much attention to the Dolphins this year, but I do know that their starting quarterback situation is not all that good. Tua, he did play in the last matchup against the Bills, but from what I know, he seems to be a game-time decision, and he's been playing recently because, he did return back from his concussion, but again, might be a game-time decision, and if he is going to be a game-time decision, they have between either Tyler Huntley and Tim Boyle as their quarterback, which, again, is not ideal. But we'll see how this goes for this game. I'm not entirely sure if the Dolphins have thrown in the towel just yet for this season and just chalked up the season. And, I wouldn't really say that they should chalk up the season, mainly because, like, despite the fact that they're 2-6, they can still be a rather solid, they could still be a team that finishes second in their division just because of how bad their division actually is. The Jets, they've been abysmal. They're 3-7. The Patriots have also been abysmal. They're 3-7. And they could finish today with a better record than they could finish today with a better record than the Jets and the Patriots and move them all the way up to the second in their division. Does this mean that they're going to make the playoffs? Not entirely sure. Maybe if they win out, but I'm not entirely sure if they've chalked up the season. But again, Tua might be a game time decision. Aside from that, though, I feel confident with the Rams in this pick. I mean, the Rams, they do play at home. And I know that they do have a little bit of an injury-riddled roster just based off of the few games that they've played. But again, they've been able to pull off some really incredible wins with Stafford and the rest of the core that they have. I mean, the last game that I was able to see when, they played the Seahawks, they won in overtime off of a crazy Matt Stafford touchdown and a one-handed catch coming in from one of those receivers. I mean, that was a really, really good game and a really incredible way to end the game. I mean, I think the receiver was Demarcus Robinson, I think it was, who ended up catching that ball one-handed, which was, again, very, very impressive. And they also before that game against the Seahawks, they came off of a win against the Vikings, which seemed to be like a very solid team before the last few losses that they ended up taking. So we'll see how the rest of the season goes for the Rams and if they have any playoff hopes. But as of right now, I'm going to pick the Rams to win in this matchup. And now for the NBA and the NBA predictions, let's see. Do I have enough time for that? You know what? Yeah, I could speed run through this because it's only a few games. Pelicans against the Nets. I think the Nets are going to end up winning this matchup because the Pelicans have a little bit too many injuries. Spurs against the Kings. I think the Kings are going to win in this matchup. Clippers against the Thunder. I think the Thunder are going to win despite the fact that they don't have Chet Holmgren. Cavs against the Bulls. Cavs are probably going to continue to be a flawless team to be 12-0. And Wizards against Houston, I'm going to pick Houston in this matchup. And those are my predictions. So that's it for the fourth segment. And now we're going to go ahead and go into the fifth segment where I look at the NBA power rankings because they were just released before this show. So I'll be right back after this short break. If you guys are interested, stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, we're going to look at the NBA Power Rankings that were just released today. They were released earlier this morning at around like 11 o'clock. So we're going to go ahead and look exactly like which teams are in the top spots, which teams are in the bottom spots, whether I agree with it, whether I completely disagree with it. That's what we're going to do. I did this before when I was the host for the basketball podcast. I'm going to continue doing it. Let me know if you'd rather see something different, if you guys would rather see some football, or if you guys want me to talk about NBA basketball a little bit less and maybe, I don't know, maybe college football, then I can do that as well. You just let me know what you guys want in the comments. Because, again, I'm still rather new to this. So just give me a heads up and just let me know what you guys like. So if this page loads, okay, here we go. As you can see, I have not looked at this list yet at all, so we're going to go in this blind, as I always do on my basketball podcast. So we're going to go and see what's up. Now, Cavs being at number 1, completely understandable. They're the only flawless team in the NBA, and they definitely deserve that number 1 spot. I think the only team that should really be in competing for them in this spot should be the Boston Celtics. But let's go ahead and look down. Yeah, the Golden State Warriors, I don't agree with them being this high. They're probably this high mainly because they just came off of beating the Boston Celtics at home. And, I mean, it says over there that they went 2-1 in their gauntlet of games between Boston and OKC. However, I do have to put an asterisk on that 2-1 record because Boston did not have Jaylen Brown in this matchup. OKC did not have Chet Holmgren in this matchup. And like I understand that these two teams are really competent despite their despite not having Jaylen Brown for the Boston Celtics and Chet Holmgren for the OKC, the Thunder. But aside from that, I mean those are two key players that I really feel like the game would have gone very differently had they been playing. I mean, Chet is not only valuable on the offensive side, but he's valuable on the defensive side as well. Same thing applies with Jaylen Brown and the Boston Celtics. So I don't think it's really fair to move them up 3 spots from number 5 just off of these 2 wins against the injured teams. Like, I really do feel like if the Boston Celtics had everybody, then the Celtics would have won. And if the Thunder had everybody, then the Warriors still would have ended up losing and the Thunder would have ended up winning. I don't agree with them being the second-ranked team in the NBA at all. And next, OKC, they dropped to 8-2, obviously, because they lost to the Golden State Warriors. I don't really think they should be. I mean, I did originally think that they should be ranked over the Boston Celtics, but seeing now as they don't have Chet Holmgren, I expect them to be one of the I expect them to be a team that takes a little bit of a dip in the power rankings, and not only that, a little bit of a dip in the Western Conference standings, mainly because of how competitive the Western Conference standings actually are. And the Celtics being at 4, the way I would amend this, I would put the Celtics up here, and then the Warriors over here, and then the Thunder over here. And like I would, just off of the top of my head, maybe I'll like debate between keeping the Thunder here and moving the Warriors down here, but they should not have moved up 2 spots. They should not have moved up 3 spots. I'm sorry. Now, Phoenix, they ended up dropping from 4 all the way down to 5. Of course, that loss to the Kings was pretty detrimental. Not only that, Kevin Durant, as you could see here, is going to be out with a calf strain, and that's really going to be critical for the Suns and moving forward in the season, because like I think without Kevin Durant, the Suns are like dead in the water, especially in this really, really difficult Western Conference. Now, the Nuggets, they move all the way up from 10 to 6, maybe a little bit too much of a jump, but again, this team has been much better, way better than what they were in the start of the season, primarily because of Nikola Jokic and his incredible performances coming in, and excuse me, they do have Jamal Murray back. Out of nowhere, ever since Russell Westbrook started playing good, Jamal Murray just realized, oh wait, I have to keep my job as the starting point guard, and started playing good as well. And Russ did not have a very solid game against the Mavericks, I believe. I think he played pretty bad. Yeah, he ended the game with 6 points and ended up going 3 for 10. So like that's really the problem with Russell Westbrook. There are times where you're going to get a very, very efficient game coming in from Russ, but all you got to do is just wait, and then he's going to put up one of these stinker performances, going 3 for 10 from the field and 0 for 2 from 3. And, I mean, you know, he did get 5 assists and 4 rebounds, whatever. But again, this is just a stinker performance coming in from Russ. But aside from that, I mean, when you have Jokic dropping 37, 15, and 18 in a game, it's really difficult to lose that. Next, Minnesota Timberwolves, they ended up moving up 2 spots in this week. And I'm a little bit surprised that they ended up moving up 2 spots despite losing to the Miami Heat. Like, I mean, that's obviously very rare. Not to mention the fact that the Miami Heat did not even have Jimmy Butler in this matchup, and they still ended up losing. Again, not really sure how they moved up just despite this loss. I would have moved them up just to number 8, especially considering how the last few games that they played. Look, So 3 of their last 4 games. So judging off of the 3 of their last 4 games, they lost to the Heat, they beat the Trailblazers, they beat the Bulls, and then they beat the Hornets. Those teams are less than mediocre. The Hornets, they're not that solid of a team. The Bulls are also not that solid of a team. And the Trailblazers are also not that solid of a team. In fact, they're one of the worst teams in the NBA. So the fact that they moved up, despite losing to a really competent team without their best player, does not make any sense to me. I think that's a little bit overrated. But next, the Memphis Grizzlies, they ended up moving up 11. They ended up moving up, I can't do math, 3 spots, excuse me. They moved up from 11th all the way up to 8th. They're 0-3 against the Nets and Bulls, but they've won 5 of their last 6 games despite not having Ja Morant and 2 other starters in their roster, which again, very, very impressive. Does go to show just how competent this team is and shows that they could be a better team when they have the rest of their starting lineup intact. Excuse me. The Kings, they ended up moving up from 13 all the way up to 9. Again, this win over Phoenix is a really big boost, especially coming in from that really solid performance coming in from De'Aaron Fox in the final period of play, as well as DeMar DeRozan. Like that was really what they needed. And I did say that Sabonis was one of the more underrated players in the NBA. Finally, he's getting recognized and being one of the better players on his team. So not really much that needs to be said. The Pacers being at 10, I don't really agree with that whatsoever. And they did lose in a really they did beat the Knicks, which again is going to give them a boost in their ranking. But they did lose to the Hornets, and they lost big time to the Hornets. So I don't know if I necessarily move them up 5 spots and move them all the way up to 10. I wouldn't do that. The Mavericks dropping down to 11 after being ranked 7th. Again, not entirely sure if I would do that to the Dallas Mavericks. I think that's a little bit too harsh. And just looking at the schedule in the last few games that they played, they lost to the Nuggets, competent team. They lost to the Suns, extremely competent team. They beat the Bulls. They lost to the Pacers, which was, again, mediocre. I wouldn't really say that they're good, but again, it's like the flip of a coin with the Pacers. So they were able to get it done against the good team. They were able to get it done most of the time against, when they should have gotten it done, but they really lost to some really competent teams. I understand moving them down, but moving them down all the way to 11 just seems like a little bit of a stretch in my opinion. Next, Houston, they ended up moving up like several spots from 16 all the way up to 12. Not entirely sure how much I agree with that either. I mean, they beat the Pistons recently, then they lost to the Thunder, which is understandable. They beat the Spurs, and then they beat the Knicks. So the really competent teams that they played were the Knicks and the Thunder, and then they only ended up winning one of those games, which was against the Knicks. And I just don't agree with that whatsoever, moving them all the way up that many spots just off of these, these performances. Now, I mean, Jalen Brunson, he had a very good game. Karl Anthony Towns, he also had a pretty solid game in that win. For Houston, losing for the Knicks. But still, I don't think moving them up that many spots is ideal. That's just me. The Lakers, they moved down. Obviously, they went 1-4 in their first road trip of the season, but then they improved to 5-0 at home with wins over the Sixers and the Raptors over the weekend, which, it does say a lot about their home court advantage. And, I mean, that's usually how it works for a lot of these teams. Like, you're supposed to take advantage of that home court. They did end up losing to the Pistons, which is really why they were dropped down all so much. And they did lose to the Grizzlies. However, they did not have Anthony Davis. And once they got Anthony Davis back, they did start winning, albeit against really less than mediocre teams. But still, moving them down to 13, I would have much rather have them either at 12 or maybe either at 11. Again, I might actually have to do my own power rankings after this because this is just unfair for this team. The Clippers, they move up, rightfully so. They've been winning a lot of these games. They've been winning way more games than what I've expected them to. Addition by subtraction. That's just how it works. The Knicks dropping all the way down to 15 from number 6 is just absolutely ridiculous and completely biased. I'm sorry to say this. I think this is biased. It does not make any sense. I understand that they're negative, and I understand that they have not been playing at the same level that we expected them to. But again, this team is still working out the kinks of playing with each other. This is a brand new roster. They did lose to Houston, and they did lose to the Hawks, which is a really, really bad sign. And they did lose to the Pacers. So yeah, I get moving them down. But like moving them all the way down from 6 to 15, I think that's a little bit much. But that's just me. Let me know what you guys think. And we're going to speed run through the rest of these because we are running out of time. So the Miami Heat moved down to 16. Not entirely sure how I feel about that, but again, I don't think they should have been ranked 12 at all in the last time that they were in the power rankings. So not really much of a problem here. Based off of their schedule and what they played, they beat Timberwolves, they lost to the Nuggets, they lost to the Suns, which again, rather respectable, and they did lose to the Kings, which again, those three teams are very, very competent, and they ended up beating the Timberwolves, which was also a rather competent team. Next, the Orlando Magic, they dropped down despite the fact that they ended up winning 2 straight, but again, it was against the Wizards, and it was against the Pelicans, which were not, the Pelicans, they weren't entirely healthy, and the Wizards are the Wizards. Brooklyn Nets, they move all the way up from 22 to number 18. Not entirely sure how I feel about that. But again, they are a mid-tier team. Bulls, they barely move up. The Hawks, they barely move up. The Spurs, they move down, I think rightfully so. Charlotte Hornets, they barely move up, rightfully so again. Pistons, barely move up, rightfully so again. For some reason, the Bucks move up. I don't know why the Bucks are moving up despite beating the worst team in the entire NBA with the Utah Jazz. The Philadelphia 76ers, they're arguably better than them, and they're probably going to be better than them after these next few weeks because they'll have Joel Embiid back. The Bucks should not be ranked number 24. They should be worse. They're worse than the Raptors. I'm saying it now. They're worse than the Raptors. The Raptors, they should be all the way up here, and the Bucks, they should be down. Same with the Sixers. They both should be down. They did not do anything to prove that they were better just because they ended up winning without Tyrese Maxey and without Joel Embiid against the Hornets. I'm sorry, that is not supposed to happen. And Blazers, rightfully so. Actually, no, this is a little bit too generous for them. They should have moved. They should have stayed at 28, honestly. Pelicans, the fact that they're dropping down like this, I mean, maybe that makes sense, but they should be in the top half of one of the worst teams in the NBA. Utah Jazz, they should stay here. Wizards, they should not stay here. Honestly, the Wizards should be they should be here. The Jazz, they should be here. And then the Bucks, they should be all the way down here. I am very confident in saying that the Bucks or the 76ers are the 2 worst teams in the entire NBA right now. Sixers are obviously going to get better, but the Bucks, I don't really see them getting better with that amazing coaching duo of Doc Rivers and Darvin Ham. These guys should not get the benefit of the doubt for being ranked at number 24 just because they ended up beating the Utah Jazz. No, no, no. That should not happen. But that's all that I have on this segment, and that's it for my first ever podcast on the GSMC Sports Podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, whether you guys have anything you're dying to share. We're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, I recommend using Super Chat. You could also use the link displayed below the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net, and you could send in your comments and or donations that way as well. Either or really help the show. And also, let me know what you guys like to listen to on the sports podcast, because again, this is the first week that I'm going to be doing this sports podcast, and I'm not entirely sure exactly what you guys want me to talk about. You guys want me to talk more about football? You guys want me to talk more about college football? Or do you guys not really matter? Does it not matter to you guys what I talk about? And it's fine, covering both NBA and NFL in the same podcast. Let me know in the comments, because again, I am relatively new to this, and I'm looking to improve. And if you guys would like to hear more about football, I completely understand that, and I wouldn't mind shifting the focus more about football than NBA basketball. So let me know what you guys want in the comments section. But that's all that I have to say on this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your new host, Nelson, and as always, take care. Mm-hmm.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.